What up, YouTube? It is Anti-Negative here for episode 3 of Magic the Blabbering. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody had a good week.
All right, so we're gonna kind of jump into our topics for the day. So we had a big SEG tournament in Orlando over the weekend, and that's kind of a big deal because it kind of puts everything in perspective for what's going on with the meta and, what the situation is. Anyway, so we have the kind of meta breakdown here. It's pretty clear what was going on in terms of the meta game for it. We have IZZET Cauldron with 199 deck submissions there, 30% of the meta, which doesn't look too bad. It's definitely looked worse. We had 90 Dimir decks, a bunch of Azorius Control. So obviously we saw a couple things that people thought was going to win. Obviously, spoiler alert, if you haven't already found out, Mono Red Aggro ended up taking it all. So Mono Red Aggro was the big winner of the entire thing. Last week podcast, we talked about Mono Red Dragons. And there was a little bit of Mono Red Dragon representation here. We have like 14 dragon decks, and only 35 Mono Red Aggro decks. Essentially, they're the same deck. Dragons is definitely running some dragon. There is that. So we got Twin Maw, Storm Brood, and Sarkhan. Kind of the big differences there in the deck. And then in Mono Red Aggro, we have Emberheart, Mouse in the main there. So it's a little bit different. Pretty much the same like idea in terms of like how they're trying to combat IZZET Cauldron. And that's just through being faster and then having a couple like hate bears. And that is a term that is used when you have like some kind of 2-mana creature that hates on something in their deck directly. Usually it could be, pretty much like it was in Corey's era where we had the Mage Bane Lizard taxing every single spell. We've had a bunch of kind of like hate bears like this in the past where they're like 2 to 3 mana to shut down some certain parts of like the tier 1 meta deck. Mono Red Aggro ended up taking it, and they did it with Razorkin Needlehead in main, 4 of them. And that card has shot up in price over the weekend. So people are now kind of like going to start teching for this deck, and they're going to start playing this deck. So you're going to see this pop up probably more than Dimir and Azorius Control, which had a big meta share. Again, I've been kind of a preacher of Dimir midrange for the last couple weeks here, and just in general, it's like Dimir midrange, good option for to like combat the meta right now. Decent win rates across the board for it. We also have this meta share PNG here. We can kind of see what's going on with this whole meta game here. Overall, IZZET Cauldron's win rate was 57% over the course of 2,000 games. That is a ridiculous win rate. And then it's only beat by Mono Red Aggro with a 58% win rate. And these are like Oko levels of win rates. This is not good to see. We don't like seeing that. But sample size for Mono Red Aggro is much lower. So we have 369 as opposed to 2040 for IZZET Cauldron. Essentially, what it looked like was that there was a huge financial deficit for a lot of people coming to this Orlando tournament. I even heard stories from people who had all the cards to go and play Cauldron, but when they showed up, they were just like, you know what, I'm going to be miserable. So why don't I just like try teching in some other cards and make IZZET a little bit more fun for myself and go like 200th place, whatever, and not give a shit. And that's totally fine. That's valid. If you're going to be hipster about it, might as well go down in style, I guess. But yeah, so essentially, like if you try to be hipster like that or try to be interesting, play Naya Yuna, JESKAI control, SULTAI control, whatever. Like we have 154 other decks. Essentially, it came down to who could beat IZZET Cauldron the best and how are you beating IZZET Cauldron, which is the exact same meta that we just got out of with Tarkir and Corey still. pretty much defining the meta and literally warping the entire meta around its game plan for IZZET, which is not a great thing. So even though Mono Red aggro beat them this time, Cauldron and IZZET decks are very malleable. What that means is that they can pivot towards the thing that beats them the best. So there's a lot of Cauldron decks right now that were the top 8 of the entire tournament here. And we saw day 2, the meta share didn't go down for IZZET Cauldron. What it did was kind of make it very clear that, like I just said before, you were on some copium if you thought that anything other than Cauldron was going to kind of break through, other than like the hard counters, which was like Mono Red aggro, Azorius control, Dimir mid-range. All those kind of were able to like pop through a little bit. But yeah, we saw the meta share pop, like go from 30% to 50%. And essentially the amount of decks was about 80 in day 2 of Cauldron, and the rest of everything else, which pretty much is like, if it's 50% of day 2's meta, it's also 50% of the representation of IZZET Cauldron players in general as well. So very high turnover. So that means if you did invest into Cauldron, it pretty much secured you a day 2 seat, or at least got you close. So that's not the greatest thing. Nobody likes to see that, because it also ended up in the exact same type of like turnout in the finals as well, where it was literally just all IZZET and Mono Red. Yeah, again, Mono Red aggro ended up taking it. And next time, I'm sure IZZET Cauldron is going to have a little bit more for the Mono Red matchup, which means, just to interject back to my last point, why did Cauldron not have Torch to Towers in main? It's because they were trying to play against Azorius control, because that was kind of the, I guess, auxiliary deck that could kind of beat Cauldron at its own game and kind of shut them down. So they wanted to like have more main deck Riddlers. So a lot of people are playing 4 Quantum Riddler main and like 1 Torch to Tower, because they wanted to be like main board for the Azorius control matchup, and then kind of pivot game 2 against Mono Red aggro or Dimir midrange. But yeah, we saw a huge drop off in other decks that weren't doing those types of things. Esper Pixie tried to I would say if there's any deck that can kind of beat Mono Red consistently, it's kind of Pixie. But I say that with a grain of salt, because Pixie just kind of loses to Fire Magic most of the time. So you have to play around the fact that, it's just going to be really hard for you to beat Fire Magic if you play Esper Pixie. And that's one of the reasons why the deck has kind of fallen off a lot. Everybody I know that has taken that deck and invested into it is not very happy with its win rate right now. And if you look at the meta share again, Esper Pixie, 45% win rate, sample size of 127, so not that much, but the win rates against the kind of more top end decks, very, very bad. And it looks like it pretty much only beats up on IZZET Prowess, which is not saying that much because everything kind of beats up on IZZET Prowess. So yeah. In conclusion, the tournament was, kind of making it very clear that there's something wrong with the meta right now. Hopefully we can see some kind of change, if not soon, I guess in November, and we'll just have to accept that this meta is just going to be broken. And yeah, so I mean, if there's anything I could just yell into the void to WOTC and to the balance team about, is that, I know you guys have said that you want long standard to make people feel a little bit more comfortable investing into their decks. If you were to ban IZZET Cauldron, ban Vivi, ban Cauldron, ban both. I don't believe that anybody of that nature would be super angry about it. If anything, they probably had to pivot from a cool deck that they like to play into this thing that they have to play. So, because I know that if I was to be playing RCQs right now, I would have had to just pretty much bite the bullet and buy that deck. And yeah, it doesn't feel good because I've invested, a good amount of money into like building a bunch of SULTAI decks that I like, Grixis decks, completely unplayable right now. And even if I wasn't playing something a little bit more fringe, pretty much everything else that's not fully equipped to just take down Cauldron is just not able to play the game. So I would implore them to take a little bit of a look and just like, we know that you guys are doing your best and you're working hard. This is not the mob yelling at you. This is one of the players that I think that they have in mind when they say like, yeah, we want people to invest in decks and then like feel comfortable buying a deck for, 3 years, because that's what I like about New Standard and the length. But yeah, this type of meta share over and over again, this makes me not want to ever buy a deck again and to just pretty much play MTGA and just kind of like vibe and chill, because playing MTGA and realizing that you should probably play the tier 1 deck isn't minus $500. So yeah, it's a little bit sad. Hopefully we can get to a point where it's not this type of meta share over and over and over with IZZET like on repeat. And just from a player perspective, yeah, banning Cauldron is not going to fix the problem. I had a whole rant about this. You have to kind of either hit VV or hit both. And this is coming from them, from the balance team, design team making this decision. They would have to know that obviously nothing else will break Cauldron within the next year and a half, really. Because Cauldron's going to be here until the beginning of 2027, which is an entire year of it being legal still. And VV will be around for much longer than that. So people think that, well, they're creating conspiracies for the most part. We see it coming from pretty much every blog, from, every single Twitch chat that you're in. You're seeing people say like stuff about like WOTC's never going to ban VV because they want Final Fantasy to thrive. They don't want to mess up their relationship with Square Enix. Like all that stuff is just, well, straight up, it is speculation. You don't know. And be like, if you were to really speculate on something like that, they've already made their money. This is standard. This is not Commander. They're not making all their money from standard players, nor would they in general, because standard and pro players, they don't buy boxes, they buy singles. And then it's even questionable whether or not they even buy their singles. They can rent decks. They can have a team that goes and buys stuff for them and just has it on stock. So yeah, don't speculate on stuff like that. Don't assume that WOTC's never going to do anything about it, because if you actually listen to Gavin Verhey, who has said on his Good Morning Magic kind of, I guess, podcast as well, that they know VV strong and they will, keep an eye on it. And if it turns out to be too strong for standard, they will do something about it. And it's turning out that it is too strong for standard, obviously. But yeah, so you don't want the design team to stop taking risks, because you want to have fun cards. You want to have it be, that kind of fire design vibe. But, to a certain extent, we have a big standard. We have a lot of cards. We want stuff to be moved around when it's completely warping the meta. And we saw at the beginning of July when all that stuff was banned, Dimir was pretty much king made, which is like, when I saw it, I was like, all right, so they banned every card from every good deck that was like really putting over the top. And then they didn't touch Dimir at all. So like, I just kind of assumed that they made Dimir the king of the format. And it was literally everybody, recognized that as well, played Dimir and won. So you definitely had that effect. And was that a bad standard? No, it was just a really kind of bottleneck standard, because Dimir had all the best removal and everything around it kind of wasn't able to thrive because of that. But unironically, IZZET Cauldron was stronger before rotation, because it didn't lose anything from all those bans either. But Dimir having all that efficient removal made it so Cauldron kind of had a high roll a bit. And I played a bunch of Cauldron before it was in this state here, which is like a weaker version of it before August, which was rotation with Edge of Eternities. And now it's just even stronger because the meta is so skewed with its removal. Like Dimir can't regulate stuff like this as good as it could, or as good as it used to. So this is the standard we have now, and now you have mono red aggro being the only thing to beat Cauldron again, which is kind of a bummer. But again, mono red aggro, as good as it is, Cauldron can kind of pivot their main deck to beat mono red aggro. This is not impossible for them to beat. They can bounce Screaming Nemesis. They can kill all the Needleheads. They just have to put some removal back into the main and stop going too all in on the Riddlers. It's a pretty easy shift. But yeah, anyways, so on top of that, we had not only this type of turnout with the meta share. This is kind of like another topic that I wanted to talk about here. We also had people just kind of not showing up. And this over everything, you know, back to like me screaming into the void at the dev team, design team, and balance team, which are kind of all one the same. That's the red alert. That's the point when they are looking at standard and seeing like, is meta healthy? And now you look at turnout numbers. And when SEG ran last year, they had about 1,400 people plus. And this year there was only 671, I think. So that is a 50% drop off. We're not seeing people show up. I know that places around me that run events, they are doing all types of stuff. But for the most part, I've only seen people like, you know, very light amounts of events pop up around me. In California, where it's pretty common, there's a lot of like good spots for it. A lot of places aren't being able to fire RCQs and all this stuff. It's a little bit of a bummer. So, you know, what that means is like the more grassroots random LGSs won't be able to run their RCQs, but the more well-known ones in like city centers, they will pretty much have everybody go in there because everybody is not able to get the RCQ in like the corner of their city. And I'm not going to, you know, dox myself, but, yeah, pretty much you would have that happen. Say if you were in like LA or something, you might not find the one in greater LA, but the ones that are kind of the more well-known bigger LGSs will continue firing, have a bunch of people show up. But that's because everybody's kind of being, funneled into these more well-known places where people know it's like, oh, okay, well, if this one's not going to fire, I bet this one will. And then everybody just kind of goes there. Then you end up seeing like, oh yeah, standard looks fine. It's like, well, there should have been way more RCQs, but they just like weren't all firing because nobody wants to play against Vivi this much or any deck for that matter. And it's kind of a bummer. So yeah, to sum up, it's not a great look for standard. We're not having that much fun. As someone who loves standard and always plays it, this is not something you want to see for the meta. This is not where you want to see the meta go. And hopefully, come November, they do something drastic, like ban at least 2 cards. If they really want to be crazy with it, they would also take a look at Dimir and be like, all right, we'll take Enduring Curiosity from you. Because that card's pretty ridiculous. A lot of people know that it just snowballs their game out of control. You have to answer it as well. Is a kind of game-ending threat similar to what Vivi does. Obviously, they leave up 4 mana on turn 4, and you just kind of assume that's coming down. So it being flash speed, also pretty much a 2-for-1 in terms of kill ability. So you have to like have specific exile removal in order to actually kill it, which is sacrificing your deck in some way. Having exile removal is definitely a specific tech you need to have for your deck. You're not just always going to have that. So yeah, maybe if they want to go crazy, they take care of Curiosity. Personally, I don't think that needs to happen. I think if you were to be from like looking at a game and balancing from a standpoint of, all right, so we want to like make sure the entire meta like has room to breathe. We want to release all these sets and see how they cook. Because obviously they only get to test in a vacuum. Yeah, best thing you can do is let it cook, right? And if Dimir is the king in the format, this is the best way to balance Dimir because it has a lot of like kind of fair cards and Curiosity is another fair card. So it's just unfair with how you have to kill it. That's pretty much the only reason why it's like so good. Toski, which was like, I think a call time card, was kind of the same effect on the meta. I mean, a little bit. I wouldn't even say effect on the meta, but it was an effect when it came down. It was a 1/1 with indestructible. So you had to like reduce it, get like toughness reduction in order to kill it or exile it. So you need specific type of removal. And yeah, so it was only able to be played on turn 4, but now Toski has flash and Toski was legendary. So now you can have more than one. Similar to the way Dimir Ninjas used to play with Ingenious Infiltrator, which I loved that card. I definitely still play it whenever I decide to like troll in Historic. I used to play it in Modern when I played like Budget Modern with like Fallen Shinobi and Fairy Seer and all that. That was a very classic deck. Used to be one of my favorite decks of all time. Unfortunately, those are completely unplayable, including Historic Ninjas. Because Historic has kind of devolved into this kind of MH3 soup, which that's a whole other conversation. And I would probably want to make some Historic content at some point, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you've been casually listening, lurking to these podcasts, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. That would be really awesome if you were to do any of those things. Obviously, not super awesome if you want to go and leave some hateful comments. Got a couple of those about the Ultimate Guard shit, which is all good if you want to be like that. But pretty much I just won't give a shit. But yeah, feel free to leave a comment and say whatever you want. I'm open to discussion. But just know if you're going to be hateful, I probably won't engage with it. Just because there's no reason to give you that type of attention. Or anybody for that matter. So yeah. So anyways, back to reality here. We had, SCG Orlando, which was the big turning point signpost for where the meta is going. We saw it do exactly what everybody thought it was going to do, which was going to be VV dominated. And then the thing that beats it is the thing that counters it. So that is the literal definition of a meta warping deck. And just because Mono Red beat it doesn't mean that Cauldron is balanced. It means that we have the exact same situation as we did before, except now instead of Mage Bane Lizard, it is Razorkin Needlehead, because obviously Mage Bane Lizard doesn't beat IZZET Cauldron. They don't spam spells like that, although they do spam spells, so it's not completely useless to have a Lizard in your deck. They're not doing it in the same way where they need to like cast a bunch of 1-drop spells. They're just trying to like draw a bunch of cards. So that's where Razorkin Needlehead really just like hits them in the face pretty hard. And then they just didn't really have the main deck removal for it. So they ended up getting kind of blindsided by that. And then Nova Hellkite, also very good card. Super good against Dimir as well. Can kind of take down a Kaito, kill their blockers. That's one reason why this deck also kind of shined through a lot of the other stuff. It's like Mono Red's actually pretty good against the other decks that are trying to beat VV as well, because they'll have so much kind of hate for it in their sideboards, so they end up kind of like taking out some of the more traditional removal to like opt in for like intimidation tactics or a bunch of graveyard hate randomly, or Azure Beastbinder, which Beastbinder is pretty good against everything, but it definitely isn't like a catch-all, like every deck can be shut down by this card. It just like Beastbinder just has to be like kind of acknowledged. It can turn your Nemesis into a 2/2, but guess what you do with your Nemesis? If you see a Beastbinder, you just swing into it. So, it doesn't really matter. The best thing Beastbinder can do against that deck is like turn their Hellkites into 2/2s, but those are getting warped, so you're never really able to interact with the Hellkites super well, unless you have like Shoot the Sheriff or some other removal that kind of has been teched out of the Dimir deck for other like Cauldron-based interaction. So yeah, Mono Red pretty good against that. Mono Red also pretty good against Azorius Control. Obviously, it's pretty fast, so they definitely are, in a good spot to beat Cauldron, because they also beat the other Cauldron counters, which are hard to call counters to the deck because they just do control-y things, tempo things, and then they just like try to shut down a little bit of their early value. But obviously, like, I've played against Azorius Control with VV Cauldron as well, and Control needs to have pretty much everything go right. They need to like no more lies, all their early stuff super like efficiently. And then they need to have all their get loss. So this is like really bad removal that Azorius Control is having to do. They need to counter stuff. They need a board wipe. They need to play Ultima. Like they need to get to the Ultima. And then even then, like, say like they counter everything else, but then Profs gets through at some point, and now you have to deal with the Profs and a Riddler, and you need like all your Seam Rip sometime. It's like, then it just comes down to that VV deck drawing Riddler and just beating you down with the Riddler. So it's just, for Control, not really the best matchup, although it can kind of like high roll everything. And yeah, so it's kind of what a lot of people ended up having to do at this Orlando tournament. A lot of high rolling happened. Mono Red aggro high rolled their way to the top 8. They end up getting into a literal mirror match round 1. It was like all Cauldron, like 6 Cauldron decks, and they are all mirror matching against each other. And then the 2 Mono Red decks that got through ended up facing each other round 1. So that's a bit unlucky for them. I kind of expected them to just like peter out because of that, but the guy who won ended up winning the whole thing. So that was my other prediction. I'm like, well, either Mono Red is going to just lose round 2 and they're gone and it's going to be VV all the time here, or the Mono Red guy can just play super well and high roll all the way into first place, which is huge. Like getting first in this tournament is like $10,000 plus. I think you get a box of every single like set, legal and standard right now, and then you get a Worlds invite. So it's just like everything that you could ever want as a standard player, you get from this. So congrats to that guy, and yeah, congrats to the Mono Red player as well. Just Mono Red taking the tournament. It was the good guy here. But again, just to kind of sum up here, VV and Cauldron can tech against Mono Red. So I wouldn't bank on this just always winning. Yeah. So maybe if they tech against Mono Red, they lose against Control or Dimir. So we'll see. If that's the case, then, you know, we might see Dimir or Control take the next tournament. Either way, this deck existing in its state right now makes sure that a lot of other kind of cool decks can't be played. We didn't see any Simic Ouroboroid make it through. We didn't see any like Teamer Battlecryer make it through. Gruul Delirium didn't make it through as well. It's like everything that used to be just like a strong deck in its own right, has to change a lot of their game plan in order to beat Cauldron. So this is just bad. Like, we don't want this. Like, it's too many consistent versions of this meta. We need it to change. We need intervention again. Obviously, there's too many cards in standard. So for people to be like, well, you know, if you're gonna ban this, you might as well ban every good card in every deck, and you know, we'll just be ended up in Pauper. It's like, that's not what we're asking here. This is obvious. Like, this is the same meta that we just got out of from all these bannings. So obviously we missed a couple things. And it's already a bad look on the dev team. People are already calling them out from all different angles. So they might as well just address it, move on, get over it. It happens. Nobody's going to like fault them for having to ban another card. And again, if people are thinking that VV is not going to get banned because it's a Final Fantasy Square Enix Universes Beyond card, you obviously don't know that. And B, you need to go listen to some designers actually talk about the game and how they ban things. This is not something that they've ever admitted, said, or even alluded to, hinted at. They always pretty much say that if they're going to try something new with a card, regardless of it being Universes Beyond or not, it is just going to be removed. That is not something they've hinted at because you have a conspiracy in your head that they have some kind of contract with Square Enix saying like, all right, so here's the thing. You can make our cards, right? You can put Cloud, Sephiroth, all this shit into your game, okay? but you can't ever ban the card because that would not be good. That just doesn't exist. So you're wrong. It's not a great look on them, obviously, but if you think that this is going to change the relationship with other like companies who are like, oh, I don't want to work with Magic. You want to know why? Because they made Vivi too strong, and even though the IP getting passed into Magic made $200 million on day one, because they banned a couple of the cards from the set, let's not work with them. Like, do you see how insane that sounds? Like, I don't think anybody in their right mind would look at a possible deal and relationship with WOTC as a bad thing just because a couple cards get banned. You're going to pass up on $200 million worth of profit, and then possibly putting that in your contract like, well, we saw $200 million be made here, so if you want our IP, it's going to cost you $100 mil. And we don't know what their contracts look like. So if you put a little logic to it, I don't think at any point during that discussion or in their contract is like, you can never ban the cards because of X reason, which would be really silly because they're working with non-card designer IP other than like Marvel, but they have their own teams for that. I mean, they all have their own card game. That doesn't mean that the Final Fantasy card game is any good or playable at all or sells at all. So, yep, just put those things out of your mind. You know, also have a little faith in the design team. You know, don't put everything on them. Don't say that nothing's ever going to get done, because that's pretty much how you stop the dialogue with those people, because there's a lot of people who are very open to talking about stuff like Mark Rosewater, Gavin Varhi, Carmen Klomperons, Jadine. A lot of those people work very hard, love the game, and, you know, are very open to talking about this stuff. And the second you come at them with some kind of conspiracy theory and ill-informed misinfo that you may have either cooked up or heard from somewhere else and then have internalized and become mad about, just throw that out, have a real conversation. They're very willing to like have these conversations because they're just normal people. Anyways, always, if you're mad about the game for X reason, too many sets, too expensive, you know, don't yell at them, yell at WOTC, because that's out of their control and that's not their department. So anyways, moving on to our next topic, because that was kind of all in one there. Let's talk a little bit about Spider-Man. So Spider-Man is coming out very soon, about 20 days, 25 days. I think it's the 27th of September. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's looking pretty cool. I'm definitely liking where it's going. There's a couple like really cool cards to like note here, both for standard or for commander. So these cards, definitely keep an eye out for them, because either they're going to be must buys or they're going to have some type of cool effect that might be worth building at some point, which we like. We want cards to be buildable. That's another thing to shout into the void about. Like, we want some cards banned because you have a bunch of sets coming out, and I want to invest into some of these sets and I want them to be playable. And no, I don't really believe that we need this to power creep something that's already very broken right now in order to be playable. So let's try to move some stuff out of the way. That would be great. But anyways, so couple cards I want to talk about here. So the first one here is Multiversal Passage. This is a land, and it's a shock land, but it's a basic that's a shock land. This is going to be a must buy. So you're definitely going to want to get all 4 copies as quick as possible for as cheap as possible. So I keep an eye out for them. I don't know how much product this set's going to move, so you could buy them and pre-order them on release. And, you know, as somebody who is a standard player, not a commander player, I don't buy boxes, so I buy singles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep an eye out for this card. And yeah, we're going to have to make sure that we can buy it at a decent price. And yeah, so yeah, you can choose a land type, a basic land type as it enters, you know, any of the main food groups there. And then you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters tapped. And then this land is one of those basic. So it's an awesome land. It's going to be a 4 of in pretty much every deck that is at least 1 to 2 colors. 2 to 3 colors, not 1 to 2. Don't know why a 1 color deck would need this. But yeah, so 2 to 3 color decks will need this land because lands are a little bit effed right now. As you can see with Starting Town being like $30 a copy, which I'm very happy. I got my copies at $10. So that was because everybody was buying Final Fantasy in like hordes. So at one point, Starting Town was in a surplus and it was all the way down to $10 because on release it was about $25. So a lot of people opened them and then sold them, and then it made the price dip to about $10. So then I jumped on it then, bought a bunch of copies, and now it's $30 again because RCQ season rolled around. Everybody needed the land. 2 to 3 color decks obviously need this card. I would say 2 color decks really, really need this card, like Selesnya, pretty much everything that's missing one of their land types and has like a verge that they're not able to turn on super easily. Gonna need this card. So you're gonna need it. I would implore anybody who's looking to invest into some of these cards in the set, buy that card, if not anything else. The next card to look at is Soulstone. So this card is super, super, super good for Commander. But it's also just like gonna be one of the main enablers for black-based kind of like mid-range decks, just in general. Could be in mono black as well. But yeah, this card's gonna be pretty much a must-buy because you can, sacrifice one thing, and then it becomes a reanimation target. So exile a creature you control, harness. Looking at the other version. Yeah, Soulstone, Infinity Stone type. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's not any graveyard, so that is something to note. But it reanimating anything for 7 mana, pretty good. And then as a Grixis player, I really want this because I have a lot of haymakers in the deck, like Kafka, Meringue, River Regent, or even Oil Deep Gearhulk. Like if I put this down on 2, I can get all that stuff down on turn 3-4. So this is going to be a must buy for me. I'm going to have to get at least 2 copies of this. Yeah. So this is going to be an expensive one, probably about $50 a copy. And I'm kind of willing to spend that much, but with Standard being in the state it's in right now, it's like, do I want to invest that much? Not really, but you know what? We'll bite the bullet on that one. That one's pretty good. So we're going to have to get it. Just have to make sure that we're, investing wisely there. And then for the most part, I don't know, this set looks pretty good. It's not like the craziest set I've ever seen. There are a couple cards here that are like really fun looking. Like we got this like Spiderman point meme, Imposter Syndrome. Pretty cool card. Here's a combo with this card specifically. You could play it with Kaito. And then if you have Kaito connect to make, damage happen, which he usually does. Obviously, this is a 6 mana card, so you can play it in something like SULTAI or something else that can like actually ramp. But yeah, if your Kaito connects and this is on the field, you can create a non-token, you can create a token copy of a non-token creature, and it isn't legendary. So that means you can make infinite Kaitos with this, which is pretty crazy. So that's something to keep in mind here. That's a really cool effect. And then you have other cards like Agent Venom. This is it's another kind of like cool like sacrifice card. It has flash, it has menace. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you draw a card and lose 1 life. For 3 mana on a 2/3 body, that's pretty good. So want to check those out. Some fun jank to be made there. And then a couple other cards that we're kind of looking at here. Overall, though, this set, from the words of Rosewater himself, who has kind of taken the lead on this one, I'm thinking because he loves Spider-Man so much, this is kind of like his Final Fantasy, where a lot of millennials like myself, we love Final Fantasy. I'm not super into comics, but, definitely like Spider-Man. Definitely one of like the only ones I liked. Obviously, I'm definitely more into the villains than anything. Always thought Spider-Man was a little bit vanilla for me. More into like Venom and Carnage. But yeah, overall pretty interesting stuff here. Another card to note, which I'm pretty sure is not playable for standard, but for Commander, this card might be really cool, which is the Spot Living Portal. Looks pretty bad on the surface. It's a 5 mana 4/4, so got to get past that. But if you start blinking this, say if you played Teleportation Circle, or if you're like in Esper colors and you have Tassa, this is the actual Tassa, not Tassa's Oracle. You could blink this, and what this says is when the spot enters, exile up to one target non-land permanent and up to one target non-land permanent from a graveyard. That's any graveyard. So you can exile two things, and then you're exiling it with the spot. So it goes in under the spot, and then when the spot dies, put him on the bottom of its owner's library. So he doesn't go away. If you do, return the exiled cards to the owner's hands. So that means when the spot dies, these cards go back. So that means if he goes into exile, the cards go away. So that means that if you have Teleportation Circle, you're just exiling stuff from people's graveyard and from their board. And then, you have more flickers in that deck. You can just keep flickering him. And then he keeps exiling stuff. So this just becomes hard removal in those decks. And it's going to have to be answered. But guess what? When he gets answered, they have to exile him. Because when he dies, they put him onto the bottom of their library. So they can reshuffle the deck and find the spot again. The spot doesn't go away. He goes back into your deck. He doesn't go into the graveyard. So they have to physically exile him. And if they do that, they have to do it before you can flicker it. So this card is pretty sticky and annoying to deal with in Commander. I would see this as kind of a really interesting way to like kind of cap out one of those decks. You can maybe even make it your Commander. I don't know. I don't think as good as a Commander, but I think if you're playing like Esper Blink specifically, where you can do a lot of different directions into flickering stuff, i.e. Tassa, this is like a Aminatu style like Blink deck, which like that should just be the deck with this dude. You might want to like tutor him up, and then there you go. Now you have the spot engine. Sounds pretty cool. Sounds pretty annoying. Probably gonna make you arch enemy if you start doing that shit. So that's good and that's bad. So I don't know. All right, now I think I want to take a look at a couple more cards here that I think are pretty cool. So we have Mysterio, which is a 4 mana 3/3 illusion villain. So human villain. It creates a 3/3 blue illusion villain creature token for each non-token villain you control. Exile those tokens when Mysterio leaves the battlefield. So this is really interesting because you can like kind of make a blue-black villain deck, maybe Grixis, whatever. And then when you play Mysterio for 4 mana, he can just like spawn a bunch of 3/3s. So that's pretty cool. And then if he dies, then you lose all those illusions. But this can just flood the board and win turn 4. Like say if you had like 1, 2, 3 drop of villains, and then you play Mysterio, you will make 4 bodies. That's 12 power for 4 mana. So I think that's pretty cool. Might be jank, but it's definitely worth checking out. Also, to note, there is a card called Oscorp Industries, and it is a Grixis land. Oh, so it's not bad. Not bad. Grixis definitely got some cool stuff, and they got Grixis mana. So this is really awesome. Like I'm stoked. And also this Grixis land, Oscorp Industries, has Mayhem. So you can discard this and then put it onto the battlefield. And obviously you can do that with a few of the cards in this set. There's one, I believe it's Modal Green Goblin, the ultimate Green Goblin, a 3 mana 5/4. And at the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card, then create a treasure token. So that's not even bad. It's not even bad. And I think that is definitely a worthwhile card. 1 and 2 modal Rakdos. So you can play him in mono red, you can play him in mono black, you can play him in anything that has those colors. So you can be a Dimir card. He could be a Rakdos card. He could be a Grixis card. He could be a Golgari card. Golgari would want to do some stuff like this as well. So really cool card. I think Ultimate Green Goblin might be one of the cards you might want to look out for too. There's a lot of like really cool like bangers like that in this set, which I personally like really like. So I'm going to keep my eye out for little things like that and be like, because I have, you know, a bunch of wild cards ready to go for this set. Fortunately, I'm not a recognized creator, so I can't actually like test stuff on like the streamer events or anything like that. Maybe one day. But for now, we'll just have to do some interesting stuff like that. We also got Carnage as a menace creature. We have Electro, which kind of does some weird, like, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Bergie, but this is kind of similar to what Bergie used to do. Bergie's from Kaldheim. It'd be like when you cast certain types of spells, you get like extra mana from doing that. This doesn't empty out the pool though, so you can like kind of store them off with this and then keep a bunch of that mana for a bit. And then say if you had like a blink deck, you can play them like Boros. You can like flicker them and then, you know, pay X and then he deals X damage. So you can like kind of charge him up and then have him like blast an opponent, which is really interesting. And then I think the last card I want to talk about here. So we talked about the Multiversal Passage, talked about Oscorp Industries, Mysterio. Parker Luck is also another cool one to check out. And then some of these cards that I wanted to mention. So this is a colorless card. It's called Doc Ox Tentacles, and it's a 1 mana equipment. Obviously, 1 mana equipment's pretty good. Equip for 5, not that good. But here's what you do with this. You play Nova Hellkite, right? Or you play something with haste. Like I play Grixis Haste with like the Frost Siege, which, you know, you can give everything trample and haste. So you can warp in Quantum Riddler, attach this, and it gets +4/+4. If you're just playing like a normal Hellkite deck, you can play a bunch of these Doc Ock Tentacles. And on turn 3, like if you, like here's the most high roll hand. You have 3 of these in your hand. Play 1 turn 1. You play 2 on turn 2. And then they're just like, why the hell do you have all these tentacles out in the field? Then you play Nova Hellkite because you're warping in. Similar to the Impend, it doesn't lose its CMC value. So this is like the up the beanstalk equipment, where now you can just equip all 3 of these tentacles to the Hellkite, and it becomes a 16/16, well, 16/17, and then hit them for 16 damage on turn 3. That sounds pretty cool. But also, if you just had 1 copy of this and you hit them for 8 on turn 3, that's also pretty good. So I think it's a pretty interesting aggro card. I'm probably going to play it in my Grixis Haste deck because there's a lot of like haymakers that would love to have this on there. I would even be down to equip this for 5 sometimes, you know, where it's like +4/+4 and like Oil Deep Gearhulk. I'm down because that would make it an 8/8 and I gain 8 life. So that's pretty good. I like that. So that's another card to look out for. I think that will be kind of a good one. Other than that, other stuff I wanted to talk about really quick is we got the announcement of what's going to be the actual set for Arena, which is going to be through the Omen Pats. And for the most part, it looks kind of interesting. It doesn't look bad. Like, it definitely could have looked a lot worse. We've only seen a couple cards spoiled so far. We have the Soulstone, which is now the Terminus of Return. And it has its, I believe this is called a subtype here. It is not an Infinity Stone. Obviously, that is a IP owned by Marvel. So, can't just name something Infinity Stone without it alluding to Marvel or being directly created products by them. So this is now a Terminus Stone, which obviously we're going to see multiple Terminus Stones for Arena. And this is just a Soul Stone, adds 1 black mana, indestructible, awesome. And exile target creature you control, does the thing. So that's cool. And then we have Kraza, the Swarm as 1. This is Spider-Punk. So we have Riot and other spiders you control have Riot. Spells and abilities can't be countered. Damage can't be prevented. pretty good card. It's not something I'm like super excited about. I don't really want to make Spider type ball. Unless I want to make like some kind of Gruul or Jund Spider deck. That's probably what I'd look at it for. But yeah, overall, these the designs don't look too bad. They look a little bit like alchemy cards, I would say. There's something about this that's giving alchemy. Obviously, it is alchemy because it is for digital only. So this is like an actual standard legal alchemy kind of set, which is really weird. The set symbol doesn't look too bad. Definitely is not giving Spider-Man in the slightest. So that's kind of good, I guess. Hopefully we see a lot of like cool designs for every single card. We obviously haven't seen everything yet. But yeah, so this should be pretty cool. A lot of like kind of like sliver inspired things. Maybe we'll see like some more Phyrexian horror kind of inspired art. Obviously all the typing needs to be the same other than Terminus Stone here. Because that'll just be really, really important with how this kind of like lays out in terms of like, will it be 1-to-1 for you to like practice your decks on MTGA? But yeah, so Spider Human Hero will be in Through the Omen Paths, and it's just called Through the Omen Paths 1. Really, really simple naming convention there. They didn't want to do anything too crazy. But yeah, overall, this looks fine. It's not terrible. It was definitely like one of the concerns with this is like, okay, how are they going to make Spider legally distinct Spider-Man Spider dude? And yeah, it looks fine so far. So if anything, it might even be more cool to look at just because now instead of like 50 versions of one Spider-Man, we're going to see like kind of different things. So this could lead to a different, like, I wouldn't even call it issue, but something that people might identify with is they like the digital version of the Spider-Man set better and they want physical versions of these legally distinct cards, which that would be a problem. Obviously it would be a problem for them doing it. It's not a problem that people want that. It means that it's successful and that whatever they did here is good. So we want that. And I think overall it looks pretty good. I think this is definitely a W. All right. So the set looks cool. I'm stoked for it. I'm stoked for every set. Obviously I'm not stoked to be spending a ton of money all the time, on Magic, especially if they're not going to address some of the huge problems with Standard right now. One of the biggest drawbacks for Final Fantasy, which was not a drawback for their sales at all, obviously, was the fact that all the cards went into the Heartfire Hero Corey's Still environment. And so a lot of the cards didn't really get a chance to get evaluated correctly because obviously they're comparing it to the most broken versions of these decks. And unfortunately, Spider-Man and Edge of Eternity has come into that environment as well. And Cauldron recently has adapted a couple new cards. So there's a chance that they'll take some Madness cards. They might take some card draw spells. You know, we don't know yet. It's hard to tell what exactly Cauldron will take from this set. Or if it will even need a single card from this set. I don't think it really will take any cards that are like super good from this set because everything just kind of looks very it's not the best descriptor, but parasitic. It's very self-contained and everything kind of is looking for itself, you know, like spiders and, you know, other things like that, discard effects. But yeah, it doesn't look bad. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing with it. Obviously, the cards I noted those are must buys. You have to get Multiversal Passage. And if you're trying to play black, you're going to need a Soulstone. I'm not even joking. This is probably one of the best cards to come out from the set. The land itself, though, is going to be like very, very important. I'm definitely going to pick up a full set of these Grixis lands as well, because getting a Grixis Triome out of nowhere, kind of awesome. So we're going to keep an eye out for that. Also has a cool Madness effect. So it's like we can play Madness in Grixis. Like I'm super happy about that. So we're going to keep an eye on that. All right. So now for our last segment of the podcast here, let's talk about a couple decks that are kind of worth playing. And this first one is something that, you know, a lot of people have been playing for a while. every different content creator might have tried it or has thoughts about it. But yeah, this is 4-color control, aka JESKAI Black. I personally don't think it's the greatest deck. I think it might even be bad. In the tournament, it definitely didn't pull up any like good results. So this is not the greatest deck for the meta right now. I will say though that it definitely puts up a lot of resistance towards any creature deck. So bring up the meta share thing here. So yeah, it actually was played by, a good handful of people in the actual like tournament in Orlando. So its turnout wasn't that good though. So we have a 44% win rate, which isn't even the worst because Prowess was a 40% win rate. And then Sacrifice, Boros Aggro, all kind of trailed behind it. But yeah, really bad matchup versus IZZET Cauldron, which allegedly it was supposed to have a good matchup into. So I've never seen it personally when I've been playing against it, because it's trying to play 4 mana like exile spells against the Cauldrons and use Seam Rips to kind of like take control of stuff. Although some of these main 4-color control decks don't even have Seam Rip. So because the main point of this deck is to play Mystical Teachings, which is kind of a throwback to I think like 2007. I think this card was really relevant. And there was like a kind of like a Dimir control deck that was playing Mystical Teachings, because it's a Dimir card. It's an instant spell. Search your library for an instant, or a card with flash, put into your hand, then shuffle. Really good tutor. So you'll find like inevitable defeat with it, and then you'll be able to blow up cauldrons, pretty much anything. And that's kind of like a lightning helix on crack. But unfortunately, it's not a very good one. But yeah, this deck can kind of beat up on any like creature-based deck. It just has so much removal. It has like 31 removal spells. So like if you're playing against it, you might feel as though you're getting targeted. You're like, oh, this guy just hates whatever. It's like, that's just what the deck does. It like, they literally have to kill everything until like turn 7 so they can finally play JESKAI Revelation. And that's kind of why people call it JESKAI Black. Personally, I think the best version of this deck is with Meringue River Regent, because at least if your game plan isn't like able to stack up, because this deck can just kind of fold to a single Spell Pierce. That is one of the worst parts about this deck, is that once you finally get to win the game territory, which is like turn 7, you can just be shut down by a Spell Pierce. And that feels pretty bad. So you're definitely going to want to, have some other kind of game plan going on here. Obviously, there's Misride's Villages, so you can play around the Spell Pierce. But yeah, so cool deck. You might want to try it out. If you're into control, it's definitely a control deck to play right now. I don't know if it's the best one, but it's definitely fun. You just blow everything up and you're just like pew, 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 guns blazing. It's definitely more of a like board controlling kind of like anti-creature deck. So if you're looking for that, here it is. Personally, I think Azorius and Orzhov control might be a little bit more suited for this currently right now. Azorius control had a pretty good win rate in the tournament, but these are tournament results. Don't always take these with like as scripture. It's definitely a very like small universe here. Whereas like if you're looking into stuff that's for the large meta of MTGA, any of these decks can do results and get you, into Mythic. If that's what you're looking for, get you into higher Mythic. So yeah, 4-color control, definitely worth checking out. Just wanted to mention that one. All right, so now here's a couple different like kind of fringe decks that I think are pretty cool. First one is JESKAI Self Bounce. So JESKAI Self Bounce is playing like a bunch of, bounce spells. And this one is kind of a different one. There's definitely a bunch of ways to play this. But this is by kind of like one dude on MTGO who's like really just going all in on. But yeah, essentially you're playing a bunch of like stuff from like blue-white mostly. And then you have stuff like Outpace Oblivion, Rediscover the Way, which is a really cool JESKAI card. Mirror Room, Roaring Furnace. That's all the red cards in main. And then you're bouncing that with like Nurturing Pixie, or like Get Out or something, and then you're just like replaying it. So Ghostly Dancers is a kind of an expensive card from expensive as in 5 mana, but it has Eerie whenever you play an enchantment or whenever it enters the battlefield. You get to make a creature, so it's not bad. Definitely really cool. Obviously, you're playing a bunch of rooms in this deck, so when you play Ghostly Dancers as well, it triggers the Eerie, because Eerie is not only enchantments entering, it's also when you unlock a room. So you can unlock Roaring Furnace into Steaming Sauna. Mirrored Room can become Fractured Realm, which those are pretty good. So definitely Roaring Furnace and Steaming Sauna, like those are really, really good cards in their own right. It has a pretty decent sideboard. You got Flash Freeze, Fire Magic, Scorching Dragonfire. Has a Knolls. You know, you could probably switch out something here for like a Braid. I would definitely want a Braid in this deck. Flash Freeze is pretty good though, because it can counter pretty much all the things that you need to worry about from VV decks, which is like all the red cards. Yeah, which is like FOMO, Mako, Tursa, even VV itself, and then has a Null to deal with the other cards. But yeah, it's 3 Seam Rips in the main deck, so you can kind of deal with the Profs and the Cauldrons as well. But yeah, I think it's a pretty cool deck. I think it's worth checking out if you got the wild cards for it. Or you just already own all these cards. It's kind of like where I'm at with it. Like, I just happen to have all these cards, so might as well try it. You know, it's a pretty fun deck. A lot of different ways you can build it. Really cool idea. Yeah, Jeskai Salt Bounce. I feel like this isn't the last we'll see of this deck. I think this is not even its final form, so definitely worth checking out. All right, so now the last deck that I want to talk about, because we're talking about our top 3 here. This is kind of a different take on the Simic Ouroboroid deck. Yeah, and so this version here, I remember making a joke about it. I think in the homie Flesh Eating Gnomes stream, being like, oh, why don't we just make it Sultai and add a Kaito? And we all laughed, but here we are now playing that. So it's Sultai Ouroboroid, has pretty much everything from the Simic version, but now we have, you know, things like Cecil, Tragic Trajectory, Shoot the Sheriff, and Kaito, along with Ouroboroid, which is cool. So a lot of stuff to kind of deal with creatures. It can deal with actual mono red now. This is kind of the biggest thing with this deck, is you can like run into a Screaming Nemesis and pretty much lose the game on the spot. So this kind of gets around that. You have Drowner obviously to tap it. You have Deep-Cavern Bats to kind of look at, you know, grab their Nova Hellkites or whatever. But yeah, I think this is a really cool deck. I've definitely had some good results with it, especially Kaito. Putting Pawpatch Recruit back into your hand, that's a really like cool niche interaction. And you can, you know, obviously do that turn 3, but you can kind of play around Llanowars and Kaito as well. You can just hard cast Kaito on turn 3. So this is a really interesting deck for that. It's playing less Enduring Curiosity, but there should be one on the sideboard here. And I'm just kind of sharing Flesh Eating Gnomes version because it's the version I'm playing. I might make a deck tech video about this week, so stay tuned for that. Obviously, it would mean a lot if you were to check out those as well. Keep an eye out and, you know, subscribe, hang out, vibe. But yeah, so this is a really cool deck. Definitely worth checking out. A lot of things to be done here. A lot of different versions to try as well. Sideboard wise, this can play Beastbinder, can play Tishana, can tech in Duresses. The Duress can also be Intimidation Tactics if you're really trying to get to the VV decks. But yeah, it has Heritage Reclamation. It kind of fills in some of the gaps where Dimir is lacking right now in some ways. I think this could even be better than Dimir in some ways, so only time will tell. Not sure if that's actually true, but we have Breeding Pool, we have Watery Grave, we can play this deck. This deck has good mana. Anyway, so appreciate anybody who came and checked out this podcast, who sat through it all and hung out, maybe leave a comment, like, subscribe, do the things. Yep, that's going to kind of do it for this podcast this week. Appreciate you. I'll be back next week, next Wednesday. And yeah, appreciate you.